Okay. Okay. Hi.
Hi.
So, the first question I want to ask you is, can you tell me all the from your childhood all the way up to when you were the top cop of California?
Ooh, that's a long one. I was born in Long Beach, California. It's in Southern California, one of 7 children.
Yeah.
I went to a Catholic grade school, high school, and I went to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
It's a Catholic university, famous for football and other things in Indiana.
Yeah.
Then I came home to go to law school, and I went 1 year to the University of Southern California. And then I got married and moved back to Washington, D.C. to transfer to Georgetown Law School. And I finished there, worked for a year in politics at the Republican National Committee. And then my wife and I went back to Long Beach, California. I practiced law for 5 years. Then I decided that I didn't like the representation we had in Congress, so I ran for Congress. And I was elected. Well, I lost the first time, and then 2 years later I won, and we moved back to Washington, D.C. so I could be a member of Congress. And I was that for 5 terms, 10 years. And then I went back to California, but this time up to Sacramento. And I practiced law for a couple of years, and then I was elected the Attorney General. They call that the top cop. I'm in charge of all the sheriffs in the state of California. I handle every criminal case after it finishes at the court level. I and my staff argue cases in all the courts in California and federal courts, and even up to the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the land in Washington, D.C., and I argued a case there and won. And then after 2 terms, then I ran for governor. I was the Republican nominee for governor for the state of California, but I lost. And then I was practicing law for a while, and then we had something called 9/11, terrible attack on our country, and I felt I needed to do something, so I ran for Congress again, but up in the Sacramento area, and I was elected and went back to Washington and served for 8 more years. So that's where I did all those things.
Have you ever arrested any of your own sheriffs?
I did have to have a couple of sheriffs arrested. I had to prosecute them, and they had to go to prison. And 2 of those cases, they were actually people who had supported me for when I ran for Attorney General, but they had done some bad things, stolen some money, or that kind of thing. So they had to go to jail. Yeah.
Have you ever met any presidents?
Yes, I have. My father was President Nixon's doctor. He used to go on campaigns with him around the country when I was a little kid, so I'd wait to get the phone call from my dad and he'd tell us what happened. And then President Nixon, after he left the White House, almost died of a particular condition. He had embolus, a heart problem, where he had a sort of like a little knot in his vein that went to his lung and almost killed him. And my dad was the one who saved him. My dad was the doctor. So I met President Nixon many times when I was your age, all the way till he died. So that was, probably I knew him for 40 years. I knew President Reagan. I campaigned on him. He was from California. I campaigned for him, with him. I flew on Air Force One with him. I worked in the White House with him as a member of Congress and got some new laws passed, particularly criminal laws. So I knew him. I knew his vice president, President Bush, the first President Bush, and I knew President Clinton. I knew President Bush, the second President Bush. I knew President Obama. I knew, who else did I know? I knew President Biden. So I've known a number of presidents in my entire life, yeah.
What was your favorite bill in Congress?
Well, the one that I'm most proud of is probably, it's called the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. That's where we changed many of the criminal laws in the United States and went after the bad guys and gave victims of crime a voice in the system so that they would be heard in the courts. Made the most changes in the history of the United States on the criminal justice side.
And another question I want to ask you is, where did you develop an interest in riding horses?
Well, when I was a little kid, my parents would take us on vacations every summer. And the first place that I can remember riding horses was at the San Ysidro Ranch in Santa Barbara. And I was about your size or your age, and I had never been on a horse before. And I wanted to get on the biggest horse. So they gave me the biggest horse, but he was the safest horse. And then every summer we would go someplace. And then I rode in Wyoming just before I went to college at the Triangle X Ranch in Jackson. Actually, it's Moose, Wyoming. And so I'd ride when we go on vacation. Then, when I came home as Attorney General, there was someone who lived not too far from me, and he had a horse. He said, "Do you like to ride?" I said, "Yes." So we would go out maybe 40 times a year.
Wow.
And then I had a chance to be a part owner of a ranch. It's called the Stony Ford Ranch. Mr. Steve Mark Sr., he asked me, "Would you like to be part of our ranch?" And I'd never done that since when I was a little kid. I'd always hoped I would do that. So that's when we bought this ranch here in Stony Ford.
Where did you meet the Marxes?
Interesting. One of their children, and her name is Mary. I don't know if you've met Mary, but Mary and my daughter, I have two daughters, my daughter Kathleen, they went to St. Francis High School in Sacramento, and they play volleyball together. And so my wife would go watch them play, and who was there but Movie Marks watching her daughter. And they became friends, and then we became friends, and then our family became friends.
What was your favorite job in government?
My favorite job, it's very difficult to figure out whether it was attorney. Well, no, it was Congress. It was Congress. I really enjoyed Attorney General on the state level, being the top cop, working with law enforcement people. And I helped change the laws. There's a law in California called 3 Strikes and You're Out. I wrote part of that law. I helped get that passed. It helped bring the crime rate down. We reduced the crime rate of violent crime by over 30%, and we brought the murder rate down by 50%. We cut it in half. So we figured out after I'd been there 8 years that there were probably 1 million people who would have been victims of crime if we didn't make the changes that I helped implement. So that was great. But then being in Congress, I love that. There's something new every day. You can do a lot to help people. You're representing. I got originally down in Southern California when I was first elected. I represented the area I was born in and grew up in and had family in, and so it was really fun. And then when I was up here in the Sacramento area, I had family up here, and it was just, I don't know which job I like best. Maybe Congress by a little bit.
You told me yesterday that you lived in George Washington's old land. Tell me about that.
Well, I live in a place called Alexandria, Virginia. It's right across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. And George Washington, who was our first president, right? Mm-hmm. He was also the general of the Continental Army that beat the British, that established the United States of America. He has this beautiful house right on the river called Mount Vernon. It's very famous. Many people visit it. And he had that in a total of 5 farms all around growing things. And the house I live in right now is on that land.
Wow.
So we knew that George Washington probably rode horses where we live right now. That's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah, that is kind of cool.
Yeah.
What was your most interesting travel that you made in government?
Well, you've heard of the country Russia? You ever heard of Russia? Well, it used to be part of a bigger thing called the USSR, the Soviet Union. Terrible communist country. And they really oppressed their people. They didn't allow freedom there. And there was a man named Andrei Sakharov who, because he was Jewish, they basically treated him terribly. And he and his wife were sent away to this terrible place to live in Siberia, I think. Anyway, his wife needed to have surgery for her eyes, I think it was, and so she was able to get to the United States for surgery. Well, then the time ran out. She had to go back, and she was afraid to go back. So she asked the congressman in that area, a fellow named Barney Frank, if he would go with her. And so when he tried to get the money for it from the head of the House of Representatives, our Speaker, Tip O'Neill, he said, you can go, but you have to have a Republican go as well as you, a Democrat. So we took her name was Elena Bonner, back to the Soviet Union. And she was afraid what was going to happen to her. Nothing happened to her. We were there, but we saw what communism was like. We saw how they oppressed their people. We saw how they weren't free. We saw how crummy the housing was and the hotel rooms were and apartments. It was just, they didn't allow people freedom to do what they wanted. So a lot of people just kind of gave up and they didn't work that hard. So we saw, that was probably the most fascinating trip. And they always said when you were there that you felt like you felt like something was on your shoulders holding you down. It was communism. It was this terrible idea of government that doesn't let you be free. And they always said that when you left in the airplane, as soon as you got off the ground, you felt like this big weight was off your shoulders. You felt, oh, I'm free again. And I tell you, that was like it. We're sitting on the plane, going down the runway, and then it goes up in the air and you go, oh, I'm going to go to freedom again. I'm going to get to the United States.
Yeah.
That was probably the best trip I ever had.
Yeah. Have you ever met any others? Wait, tell me again, have you, what did you arrest the sheriffs for?
Well, I remember one specific case. He was stealing money that was supposed to be used for his department. He was taking the money. It was a sheriff in one of our counties right next to Nevada. And he was taking money they had and he was using it to gamble over in Nevada. And he thought he'd win enough money that he could put the money back that he owed and still have some. Well, it didn't work out that way. So I had to prosecute him for basically theft. And I didn't like doing it because I liked him. And then there was another sheriff, and it was up in the northern counties, and I forget, it wasn't this county. And it was something similar where he had violated the law. So I could bring cases anywhere in the state, but in most cases what happened is when the local prosecutor, the district attorney in the county, would get somebody in court and then they would try them and he was found guilty. When that was all finished, then I took over the case. And so there's something called appeals, so that you can say after, if you were convicted, you can say, they didn't treat me fairly, or this wasn't allowed, or that was. And so then the appellate court, appeals is the word, appellate court, would say, hey, you didn't go, it wasn't a fair trial. My job as Attorney General in that case was to defend the decision, saying, oh yes, it was a fair trial for these reasons. And then it can be appealed further up, and then ultimately to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I got to argue a case in the Supreme Court. Very few attorneys ever get that chance.
So are some of the sheriffs that you arrested still in jail?
No, I don't think they are now, no.
Would you ever think about working back again?
Well, I would, except that I'm 78 years of age now, and probably people would say, oh, he's too old to do that. I think I could still do it, but it would be difficult to get people to vote for me at this point in time.
Who did you run against?
Well, I ran against different people each time, for Congress or governor or attorney general or what?
What about top cop?
Okay, well, I ran against a fellow named Arlo Smith. He was the district attorney, prosecutor in San Francisco, and I beat him. The second time I ran was a fellow who was in the state legislature, and right now I can't think of his name, but I think he's still in the state legislature. He came back and did it. And when I ran for governor, I ran against a fellow named Gray Davis, and he beat me then.
Well, who did you run against, governor?
Gray Davis, yeah.
Can you tell me your mom and your dad and your siblings' names?
My mom was named Lorraine Youngberg. When she was very young, sometimes she used the last name of Dunn, which was her stepfather's name. And then my dad was John Charles Lungren, Dr. Lungren. And my siblings, my older brother who has passed away was John. He was 2 years and 2 days older than I. Then I was born. Then 2 years later, my sister Christine. Then 2 years later, my sister Loretta. Then 4 years later, my brother Brian. Then 2 years later after that, my sister Patricia, we call her Tricia. And lastly, my sister Elizabeth, called Liz.
I don't have any more questions.
Well, thank you very much. You do a very good job.
Okay.
Is this your first time?
Yes, it is.
You would surprise me. I thought you've been doing it a long time. Well, thank you very much. This was very enjoyable.
And can you do one thing for me?
Yes.
Write your name right in this corner.
In this corner, okay, sure.
Or this corner. I don't
Do you want my formal name or my nickname?
Any. It doesn't matter.
I'll do my formal since you're asking me about those things. There you go, Daniel E. Lungren for you. How's that?
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.